Hello, and welcome to the Timeless Wealth podcast. My name is Jalal Madani, and I'll be the coordinator of the podcast along with investment advisors and portfolio managers whom I have here, Amy Dietz Graham and Sean Durkin. Just a background in this pilot episode, we just wanted to dedicate our time to introducing the podcast as well as introducing Sean and Amy. They've got a lot of substance and a lot of things to say. In this episode, we'll be speaking a little bit about their background, and I do have some questions for them as well. And these are questions that I believe that our listeners, as well as our current clients and even potential clients, may have when working with or hiring or even thinking about hiring an IA or a PM, an investment advisor or a portfolio manager. But before we introduce our hosts and talk with our hosts, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about what this podcast aims to be or strives to be. So the Timeless Wealth podcast, we have structured in a way where we're not only relaying boring certain information about the financial markets and the financial news. We can all agree that there's an abundance of those channels on YouTube, even in podcasts, so much of that. But more importantly, we seek to discuss in detail relevant and impactful and thought-provoking topics and ideas, and hopefully I'll have some time to give you guys certain examples of what all that means. But more importantly, we seek to have an in-depth analysis of any personal and social implications of the modern wealth climate, how to plan accordingly. Right. So, for example, one topic would be like women in wealth and women in the investment world, as well as one really hot topic nowadays is millennials in the investment. Markets Insider always comes out with articles about millennials and how the current climate, how the current capital climate is really affecting, for instance, millennials, and in the future will probably affect Generation Zs. And by doing so, we help to grow and develop our listeners' financial intelligence to perhaps impact the way they think about wealth and wealth planning, and in return, increase their confidence in financial planning and investments. We seek to build and enhance awareness of the Durkin Dietz brand, who's run by portfolio manager and investment advisor Sean Durkin and his business partner Amy Dietz Graham. And the Durkin Dietz brand is generally about a conservative stewardship of our clients' wealth as they pass through critical stages of their financial lives. And that includes, for instance, wealth accumulation as they approach retirement in their working years and as they're approaching retirement, wealth decumulation as they journey through retirement. One very important topic and service that the Durkin Dietz brand renders and offers is intergenerational wealth transfer. I was in a webcast a few weeks ago where it was mentioned that about 60% of wealth disappears after the third generation of wealth transfers disappears after the third generation. So planning intergenerational, for example, wealth transfer is very crucial. The Durkin Dietz brand also services and renders estate and tax planning. And in a nutshell, Amy and Sean and the group, the Durkin Dietz group, seeks to become the destination family office for families. We seek to become a home for clients with a world-class financial advisory family office where the group will make every effort and strive to ensure that our clients and their families and their heirs are properly positioned to be financially successful as they progress through each and every stage of their financial journey. Podcast is a way to connect with our clients and even prospective clients by taking part in key discussions and pieces of information to enlighten our listeners, to give them some confidence in the investment world, perhaps impact the way they think about investments. We know that the top 5 values of clients is proactive advice to bring them financial security and financial confidence. Family is a very important one, securing their children's financial and overall well-being. And that includes from anywhere from education to wealth transfer and the likes. Allocating capital and investing in a conservative, responsible manner rather than just going all in like poker game. And time is of important essence as well, feeling a sense of control in our clients' lives. That is very important to all of us as humans. We want to feel a little bit of control in our lives. We want to be able to live, us and the clients want to be able to live and the life that they envisioned, a life that is directed, a life that is empowered, purposeful, and inspired, where they're actually living the life that they originally intended to live. And overall, just enjoy a joyful and enriched life where clients are immersed in pursuits that nourish and engage their well-being. So that is a little bit about the podcast. I'm quite confident that over the coming episodes, they'll become a little bit more clear as to what the intent and what the engine is that's going to be driving this podcast. But overall, we just want to have these discussions, speak about matters that we know are important to our clients, answer some of the questions, or maybe even address some of the questions and some of the concerns that our clients may have. Just a bit of information. So, Sean, I have Sean here.
Hi, Jalal. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me, and thank you for that introduction.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And thank you for being here. And thanks for launching this episode with all of us. I also have Amy here as well.
Hi there, Jalal.
Hi, Amy. So Sean, I wanted to dig into you a little bit. You hold a bachelor's degree in commerce from McMaster University, and you also hold an MBA from Dalhousie, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Awesome. And Sean, by the way, everyone is married to the love of his life, Rebecca, right? He's got 2 kids, Kate, 18, and Will, 15. Sean is a baseball enthusiast and an NFL enthusiast as well. I think you have a jersey in your office, right? Baseball jersey?
Yeah, it's a signed Roy Halladay jersey actually that I picked up at a charity auction for the Special Olympics many years ago, and it's especially given what happened with Roy a couple years ago, his untimely death.
Yeah,
it's one of my cherished possessions, and it's something that I look at. Why I got it actually was when Roy Halladay was at his peak. He personified excellence in my mind. That he would go out and do things no other pitcher in the major leagues was doing. To give an example, a complete game in today's Major League Baseball rarely happens. I think there was 6 or 7 complete games across Major League Baseball a whole season amongst all pitchers.
Yeah.
Well, one year, and I believe it was 2006, Roy Halladay pitched more complete games than the rest of the American League.
Wow.
He was an innings leader, strikeout leader. He won the Cy Young Award that year, 1 of 2 he would win in his career. And so I would look at him, and that would inspire me to be excellent and work to achieve more than what I'd initially think. Because anyone who knows Roy Halladay, he was an elite pitcher, but he grew to be an elite pitcher. He didn't start out. Mm-hmm. He was actually relatively mediocre at pitching, but grew to become one of the best pitchers and ultimately ended up in the Hall of Fame.
Well, that's a great attitude. That's amazing. I did not know he was pretty much outdoing every player in the major league.
Did it for many years too.
So that's Sean. He also enjoys playing volleyball. He enjoys playing baseball, of course, and working out. And this is really interesting. He's found success in martial arts, currently working towards obtaining his 3rd degree black belt. I didn't even know there's degrees in black belts.
Yeah, there's 10 of them actually.
There's 10 degrees in black belt.
In our style, yes. It's so the style that I'm working on right now is called Kempo. It originates out of China. It's actually born of over centuries. It was born of defending rice paddies, believe it or not. And
as a defending rice, what, sir?
So what would happen is in the rice paddy fields, there is sometimes a bit of a Chinese feudal system.
Yeah.
And a lot of people or a lot of warring factions would try to take over the rice paddies of another province or territory, because rice was the main source of food for Asia, and in particular China. And so my style of martial art was born of defending your rice paddy. Which
that's super cool.
If you're not familiar, a rice paddy is basically the rice is kind of grown in a bed of water that's about probably 3 or 4 feet deep. And so you can imagine you're trying to fend off 3 or 4 people in your rice paddy in water.
So that entire style of martial arts was born out of that intent, pretty much.
Yep. And every martial art has a story behind it. For instance, I have a brown belt in what's called Goju-Ryu or Okinawan style karate, which is born of Japan and the Okinawan Islands. Mm-hmm. And it's more of a mountain fighting type style, very aggressive. Mm-hmm. Versus Kempo was more balanced, and defensive in nature. And then also I have a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well, which again, in and of itself is different.
It's really cool. You've got more degrees in your black belts than I've got degrees in general. Sean, you hold a violent belief and a strong belief in detailed financial planning, which you believe must be supported by careful portfolio management, designed only for clients to support them and their families in retirement. You hold the intuition that if we do, I'm guessing you mean investment advisors and portfolio managers, If we do our job properly, the ultimate goal is to lead our clients to build multi-generational wealth for their families. And by multi-generational, you mean like inheritance as well, right? Like, okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Sean, I have a few questions for you if you don't mind.
Sure.
You've had a very successful career since you joined the investment world, I believe back in 98, right? 1998?
Correct.
Right? And I see that you, as I mentioned, you have more degrees than a thermometer. Like you have an MBA, a designation of a CMA, a CFP, which I assume is financial planning. Is that certified financial planner? Okay. FCSI and FICB. Can you speak about some of those? And what I mean by that is you've obviously put a lot of effort and a lot of time into them. You've achieved many designations, and is it the financial plan? Is it the portfolio management or the financial planning designation that's the highest in the industry? I read something about that. That one of them is the highest designation in the industry, or one of the most prestigious.
So they both are. So on the portfolio management side, to be a discretionary portfolio manager, which Amy and I both are, that's the highest level of licensing in Ireland, and it's a responsibility that we wouldn't want it any other way, because obviously when you're managing a person's money with absolute discretion to do what's in their best interest.
And by discretion, what do you mean by discretion? Can you just
we don't need permission to act on a client's account.
Okay, so you do it.
We don't need to solicit. Now there's a lot of understood, let's say, pillars within that. For instance, we are fiduciaries. We're held to the best interest standard,
of course,
which we wouldn't want any other way. So so the portfolio management designation, for lack of a better way to describe it, something that we're very, very proud of. I've been a portfolio manager since, I believe, 2004. At one point, I'm not anymore, but at one point I think I was the youngest portfolio manager of the firm I was working in.
I read that. I'm going to ask you about that.
The highest level of financial planning, on the other hand, is certified financial planner.
And that's the CFP, right?
That's correct.
Okay, gotcha, yeah.
And I guess, I am asked from time to time why I have so many designations. I think it's born of two things. One is I had a real curiosity, an insatiable, let's say, appetite to learn my craft, to learn it well, learn it properly. And I had the time when I was younger to do it. I started.
I'm guessing this was before you were married, before you had kids.
Well, I was married before I had kids.
Before you had kids, yeah.
I was 26 years old when I started as an investment advisor, which led to the second. The second reason why I dived into learning as much as I could around our profession is you have to somewhat front load credibility when you're young in this industry, and you don't have quite the experience that you gain over time. And that led me, and Amy by extension did a similar thing, to basically building up credentials that you could point to that are industry recognized, that would give clients in the early days the confidence to work with you. Thank God they did, because most of them, the vast majority that we worked with back in the early 2000s and the late 1990s, are still with us today.
Wow. That's what,
including my first client.
About 20 years.
Yep.
More than 20 years.
24 years.
24 years. That's actually incredible. Just from hearing you speak about that, it sounds like you've got a lot of value to give to your clients. But I did want to specifically also ask you about your MBA. Tell me a little bit about that. What's the story behind that?
That was actually a really interesting time in my career, because I really wanted to. It was one of those things I wanted to finish off my let's say, graduate work. I wanted to get it done, and at the time I wrote my GMAT, did reasonably well on that, and got accepted to the Ivy School of Business, which is Western University, the Kellogg School of International Business, York University. And so forth. I also got accepted to Queen's University as well.
Wow.
And I remember my manager at the time.
Queen and Western, you got accepted.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And now that would have required, Western would have required me taking a sabbatical of a year. I think it was a year, maybe 2 years. This is going back about 12 or 13 years ago, so I'm trying to remember. But, the Queen's University would have required me taking 2 years off and so forth. And my branch manager at the time said, well, why would you do that? Why don't you put your hand up for the MBA that was offered by the organization I was working with at the time? And so I did, and it was great because I did get accepted. I was the only person in my let's say firm silo to get accepted, and I got to meet all these different people from different aspects of the bank and learned a lot. And it was done part time with a span of 4 years. And other than I have some dear friends and still keep in contact with them, and just learned an awful lot about how financial institutions work together and integrate, which is a unique perspective relative to my colleagues in this industry.
I wanted to ask you earlier. You said something along the lines of that you still had your very first client that you had, and
Yeah.
from what 25 years ago.
Yeah.
How did you manage to keep your like these clients? Like, what was I know in your with your career at the bank, you started working with high net worth individuals and high net worth clients early during your career, correct?
Mhm.
How did you manage to distinguish yourself amongst them in in the financial world, and how did you manage to keep some of these clients for 24 25 years? That's almost as old as I am. So,
Yes.
how did you do that? How did you manage to keep them for so long? Like,
Well, I think it continues today. I mean, that's something that's cornerstone of what Amy and I do. It's a strong. You want to serve your client in a very sincere, honest way. You want to have a great deal of candor with them. You want to make sure that you're providing them the best guidance you possibly can, which speaks to, again, the experience side, but also the accreditation and education side.
And by honesty, you also mean like the good news and the bad news as well.
Yeah. Right? Sometimes you want to be discussing with a client and telling them what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear. Sometimes
does the topic of death come up to that? Like some people, I can only imagine, like, most people, maybe the vast majority of people, they don't want to think about, their death and stuff like that, for estate planning and wealth transfer.
They actually do, Joel, and they will talk about it. I mean, it's especially as they get older and more contemplative, they start looking at those things. It's a reality. They understand it. I don't think anyone enjoys talking about it, but it's something that they our clients recognize needs to be looked at, because what's happening with our clients is they've all basically built up a total net worth where they're worth more today than they ever been in their whole lives.
Yeah.
And what was somewhat of a foreign concept to them 20 years ago is very real today, which is they are actually applying multi-generational wealth. And that might be a topic of a future podcast where that is a whole set of things to consider when you're in that fortunate situation.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Sean. Thanks for all that information about yourself. Definitely looking forward to having some really cool discussions with you. On to Amy. Amy, so you are educated in actuarial sciences and financial economics.
You got that right.
Yeah. So what is that, like a triple major, double major?
Well, actually, I started off in actuarial sciences, really thought, I love math, and said, you know what, I think I want to be.
You love math. Who loves math?
And I remember I said to my calculus high school teacher, I said, what do I do? What jobs do I pick?
Yeah.
And he said his biggest regret was that he didn't become an actuary. And I said, I have no idea what an actuary is. And I went home and I looked it up and I said, sure.
I'm almost thinking about that now. What's an actuary?
Well, it's looking, they work a lot of times for insurance companies or reinsurance companies, a lot of data, statistics, modeling. And I thought, you know what? Sure, I like that analytical aspect. That's what I'll do.
Yeah.
Very early on, I realized I liked the analytical side, but I wasn't quite sure I wanted to commit to an actuary. So I brought a note and said, I'll focus on financial economics and math, see how it goes. And, fast forward a few years later, when I was getting set to graduate, still wasn't sure what I wanted to do.
You're graduating from Western, right?
Yeah, I went to Western. So when I was graduating, I picked up the phone and said, my whole goal, I'll tell you this, is I hate to move. So I didn't want to move from Western, back to my small town and then have to figure out the job and then move again. So I said, before I graduate, I have to find something. So I went on this mission, and my mission took me to cold calling all sorts of people in the industry, in the financial industry, and I would just have coffee chats with them. What do you do? What do you like about it? What's your day look like? And lo and behold,
that's brave.
Well, one of the people I met worked at a hedge fund company at the time, and he said, I'm going to introduce you to a few other of my colleagues. And along the way, that's how I met Sean. So literally from a cold call coffee chat with a stranger, I got introduced to Sean. And when Sean told me about his day-to-day and what he did, I thought it was the perfect marriage of, the analytical side that I love, but the people side.
You want it to be more like personable. Like you
got
want to have those connections.
You got it. And Sean might not tell you this, but he was a very early adopter of the financial planning. So it's very common now that advisors do financial planning. But back when I started 15 years ago, it wasn't that common. It was still more so just about the portfolio and not so much about the planning piece. They were kind of kept separate in a lot of ways.
I'm going to ask you about that. I don't know. I certainly probably don't have the biggest or the clearest of understanding as to the difference. So I can only assume some of our listeners may not fully be able to differentiate between the two. So I'm definitely going to ask you about that. You have some really cool, I would say, milestones. You were a speaker at various conferences and events. You were quoted in the Globe and Mail. That is pretty damn cool. You were quoted in the Globe and Mail, CBC News, the Canadian Press, and Advisor's Edge. Geez, you're going to be soon the Kathy Woods of Michelle in Canada. You were interviewed numerous times on Bloomberg, right? And by Bloomberg, that's really cool. And this is one of the coolest ones. You were a mentor. You were a mentor for
still a mentor. Yeah,
still a mentor for women in capital markets. Definitely going to ask you some, regarding some of that. You believe successful practice at the core is with strong portfolio management and financial planning. Here's a really cool, interesting thing you said. You believe that the success of our clients fuels the success of our business. Correct.
You got it.
Definitely ask you about that. Go ahead.
I grew up in a small town on a farm. So my hometown is a little town called Mildmay. Not many people are aware of it. It's near.
Certainly wasn't.
No. So I always, for our older folks would know, if you remember Walkerton, the whole water crisis, several years ago. Mildmay is a little farming community about 5 minutes south of Walkerton, up in the Bruce Peninsula area. So growing up in a small town, there wasn't a whole lot of, investment discussions. A lot of people there save their money. They have the one person in town that kind of takes care of it, and there's not a whole lot of discussions around.
And by save, you mean just saving cash?
You got it. A lot of cash, or a lot of, just product type stuff, but there was no link of how those investments made sense to their personal lives. And that's where a financial plan really bridges those two things. It's bringing your lives and the money piece together in a planning document that can live and breathe and be updated and grow from there.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you're from a small town, Mildmay, you said it was called, right?
You got it.
That's pretty inspirational to come from a small town to the big apple city of Canada, at least. Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Sean,
I don't know too many people that make that transition from, like you said, it was kind of like farm. Who made that transition from because I'm only picturing classic farmers and stuff all the way to the investment world. That's a pretty cool transition. That's a really interesting transition.
But I think on my resume, Sean will attest to this. My summer job was working on a chicken farm, and
chicken following around.
Clearly know the value of $1. I've worked awfully hard for some of those dollars in my summer job, so. We appreciate them, and we're very cautious when we manage their money.
So I do have some questions for you, Amy. But before I get there, you love spending time with family outdoors. I assume camping, right? Camping and just basically
being
outdoor
outside.
Activities.
Yeah, exactly.
You love swimming. I guess that's one of your favorite hobbies, or just hanging out at the cottage.
You got it.
You are married to your knight in golden armor. It's a shiny armor nowadays. I don't know. Golden armor. Chris, I believe is his name.
You got it. Yeah.
You got 2 kids, 4 and 1.
Yeah.
That must be. Those
Hey, I'm not sure you want to have armor made of gold. It's a little soft.
Now you believe. Here's what I wanted to ask you something. Now you believe that great investments are nothing without a great financial plan. And a great financial plan is nothing without great investments. I want to ask you about that. How a great financial plan is nothing without great investments. But how would you explain how great investments are nothing without a great financial plan? If I'm good at investing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would I need a financial plan? What value does that add to my life?
It's a true to us. It's a true measure of how you're doing to reach your own personal goals. Oftentimes, we'll see clients to say, I got X amount of rate of return compared to, the TSX index or the S&P 500.
Yeah.
Those are all very interesting statistics, but not knowing how it relates to you personally, is that a good number? Is it an adequate number? Do you have a shortfall? Depending on your lifestyle and what you're trying to achieve, it's actually pretty meaningless. So where a financial plan, again, it bridges that gap to say, okay, what rate of return do you personally need? Think of it as your personal benchmark to achieve what it is you're trying to set out, be it saving for a children's education, be it saving for a vacation home, whatever your goals are, it's a way to actually measure your own personal success.
So if I understand correctly, the financial plan not only takes into account the quantitative measures, but it also links those numbers, those quantitative measures, to your own personal qualitative dreams or goals or aspirations.
You got it. Got it.
Amy, that reminds me of, there's a famous Monty Python skit years ago where they're talking about, Olympic, let's say sporting events that never really made it to the Olympics, for lack of a better way to describe it. And one of the ones they talked about was the marathon for the directional challenge. And what it was that a whole bunch of people lined up at the starting line. The gun went off, and they all scattered in different directions. It's quite hilarious. Well, that's kind of like investing in a plan. You can run as fast as you can. If you're running in the wrong direction, or if you're laying your ladder on the wrong wall, you then wake up and realize, well, how did I get here? And the problem with not having a plan is when you get to where you're going, you can't go back in time and fix it.
It's true.
And you're there.
Well, and think of your financial plan like your business plan. If you're a business owner, and a successful one, you have a business plan and you know what goals you're out to achieve and how to measure your success. A financial plan is for individuals to measure their own personal success in their own lives.
So, like, if I want to maybe one day buy a private jet, your financial plan will take that into account.
Put it in as your goal.
All right, cool. I got some questions for both of you guys. Just basically, speaking about the financial plan. Now, here's the first question. And this is all, of course, in light of what's happening. We're recording today. We're recording this podcast today as, just this morning, Russia was. You pretty much launched strikes against Ukraine, and who knows, World War III or not might be on the edge. But I wanted to have some. I've had some questions about that. But before I get into that, I wanted to ask you guys in the Canadian market, for example. What is the difference between investing in real estate versus, investing in the markets? And the reason I'm asking this is because you guys have mentioned the financial plan. I've addressed the issue of if I'm good at investing, why do I need a financial plan, right? What is the difference between real estate and a market? Why hire an IA, to invest for me when I could just, as Canada has shown in the past 5 years, the Canadian real estate market, whether in Toronto or in Vancouver, when I can just put my money in real estate and let that grow over time, right? Like, I believe one of the statistics showed that within COVID alone, property shot up 20 to 30% or something like that. Like, why invest with advisors? Why invest with portfolio managers when I could just put my money, for example, in real estate? I'll leave it to you guys.
It's a good question. It's a question. We think it's part of the equation. Sean and I would never sit here and say, don't invest in real estate, just invest in the financial markets. One, it's we're here to do what's in your best interest. So, we'd be disingenuous to tell you otherwise. But it's part of the equation. It's not all of the equation. I think a fixed asset like real estate is a good investment longer term. Mm-hmm. It's also kind of easier in a sense to invest in real estate for the average person because it's not priced to market on a daily basis. You don't see the numbers flashing on the house of the price value fluctuation. It's easier for clients to think longer term about an asset like that. But it's not the whole equation. Again, it's had a good run. Who knows if that run will continue, right? And so you want to make sure that you're diversified enough, having a good mix of financial assets and hard assets, and plus liquidity. You can't live off of the house. Now, maybe you do rent it out. There's some income there. But again, you want to have the flexibility in your overall plan.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think, when you look at real estate, it is an asset class. It's not me, it's a class. Mm-hmm. And any asset class, be it, owning shares in a company, owning bonds that pay you interest, or owning real estate, they're going to have their own characteristics of risk and reward. Mm-hmm. And not all assets go up in unison all the time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they do, but rarely. And
that's where the importance of diversification comes in.
That's the importance of diversification. I'll give you a small example. A lot of people want to own real estate and rent it out in Ontario, which is probably going to be a good thing long term. The problem with owning real estate renting out real estate in Ontario is that whereas BMO, for instance, using them as an example, or TD Bank or Canadian National Railway or Cisco or Microsoft, they regularly grow their dividends on average anywhere from 10 to 20% per year. And that's what they pay out to their shareholders as a portion of profit. Well, you can only raise your rent in Ontario 1% a year.
Oh, so you're saying that the increase through, for example, shares or in ways other than real estate increases at a faster rate
Much faster rate. And depending on, if there's rent controls in place, the regulatory environment of being a landlord is not an easy one. And you could walk into a lot of issues that you would not have foreseen that frankly are not, that don't come with owning, shares in high quality companies that reward shareholders for being long-term owners.
I think those are some really crucial, important points to differentiate.
You touched on kind of a second part in that question is why have an advisor?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good question to ask. Our clients are highly educated. Yes, we have lots of designations, but so do our clients. Like our clients are really smart people in their own right. And some are in the financial industry themselves. Some are in many different industries. They usually don't have the time to do it though. So they look for us to sit on the same side of the table, similar to a CEO, CFO type model, CEO of their household to say, here's what we're trying to do. Here's our goals and what we're trying to achieve. And our job, Sean and I and the team, is to really run it on a day-to-day basis for them. And then report into them on a regular basis to say, here's where we're at, here's where we need to make tweaks and changes, and, looking back at their plan ongoing.
And the other thing, too, is that when someone's working without guidance, a lot of being successful as an investor runs very counter to what makes you comfortable emotionally as a person.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's very, very difficult to separate the two.
That's very interesting.
That's where we need to, that's where we can work with our clients and engage them when it's absolutely very, very hard to make the best decision in their best interest, because what feels good at the time is bad.
Well, you're definitely getting ahead of me here, because I was actually going to ask you, what would you want your clients or your listeners to know now about the investment world in light of what's happening right now between Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah.
Like, suppose I'm an investor. I'm going to be honest with you. Suppose I'm an investor and I have my money in the market. I'm just going to want to pull out because mayhem looks like it's about to happen. We all know. Who knows? Maybe some of the presidents may want to start dropping nukes around. Right. That is just full blown. So what would you tell your listeners? Like, what would you teach me if I was your client?
Well, it's funny, to the investors that panic in some of these kind of environments, there's some very savvy investors on the other side of the deal that are buying those companies up.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger jumped to mind in that case. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, and they actually famously said, Amy, what was it? That, when everyone's greedy, be fearful, and when everyone's fearful, be greedy. There's two things you want to do in this kind of circumstance, because there's always going to be what I call the crisis du jour, and I'm not minimizing what's going on over there. I think it's very concerning in the short run, and I think that there will be a response and a rectification, but it could take some time to iron itself out. That said, the two things you want to do in this environment, assuming the following, right, Amy? Assuming you're properly diversified by asset class, you're properly diversified by industry, you're not speculating, and you're properly diversified by geography. If all those things are in place, i.e. you're investing like an institution or a pension would invest, the second best thing you can do is ignore it. Do nothing. In other words,
just let the storm pass.
Just ignore it. The fact that Ukraine's rolling, or Russia's rolling tanks into Ukraine is not going to stop Microsoft from doing their day-to-day business, or Amazon or Google or Canadian National Railway or TD Bank, etc.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do, though, is if you do have money available to invest, it's always, always, always better to invest when you're more nervous to do it.
Well, it's
always better to invest when you're more nervous to do it.
It's funny. So I'll give you an example. I was talking to a client yesterday, and a new client came into some cash, and we were talking about investing it. And we have this conversation all the time. And I said, we're going to have a conversation at some point in time. I don't know when it will happen. The one thing I can predict is a crisis will always happen at some point. We just don't know what kind or for how long it'll last, but we know it will happen in the future. And I said, we're going to talk about investing. You're going to think we're crazy. It's not going to feel good because it's counterintuitive. When it feels good, we're telling you to lean into that experience as opposed to pull away from it. And sure sugar, what happened overnight. The client called me this morning. He said, I didn't know we'd be doing this on day one. And I said, well, neither. It's a real good one. Station. And again,
that happens a lot.
It happens all the time. All the time.
So you guys are like that inside voice, reassuring the client that, hey, you know what, it's bound to happen. But do you guys take that into account when you're creating your models, your whatever idea, the financial climate, or do you guys take these into account, like these issues into account?
Model those sorts of scenarios. Exactly. We know that crises will happen. We know that markets pull back. We know that we'll go through difficult times. 2008 was a real game changer for a lot of people. That one was a very deep crisis that lasted a longer period of time, and it lasted about 8 months. In the middle of it, it felt like it was going to last forever. But in hindsight, it was about an 8-month period of disruption. As long as you stuck with it, and that's one of our most proudest moments that Sean and I ever went through, was we didn't have a single client panic and sell their money in 2008. Now, some of them were probably panicked, but they didn't do the ultimate hit the button to sell. They held through it. And when the market turned after that crisis, it turned quick. There was no way we could have timed it. There was no announcement saying crisis over. There was nothing. Nobody was waving a flag. It just turned. And if you weren't invested, you missed it.
Now, some people, some of our clients, I was just on the phone with one of those clients that did exactly this prior to this podcast. Well, they actually bought companies at the height of the 2008 crisis. They bought companies at the height of the COVID market crash. And that's your opportunity. If you can flip your paradigm, and when you look at these kind of circumstances, now I have no idea. I think, Joel, you asked me earlier on, could the market go lower? I have no clue. I mean, even if I gave you an answer, I'd be talking on my rear end.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you buy high quality, great companies that reward their shareholders and produce goods and services that people need to use every day, these type of circumstances could be game changers from a personal wealth standpoint. Because when you're buying when everyone else is selling, when there's a lot of fear, you'll journey out 3 years and be really happy that you did. And I'll tell you that, we have a couple clients that in the height of the financial crisis were buying TD Bank, Bank of Montreal, Bank of Nova Scotia, at our recommendation, by the way. And they were getting dividend yields on those stocks north of 11-12%. Wow, okay. That would be equivalent today with dividend growth of those companies, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25% cash on cash. Wow. And they were buying these stocks at $20 a share. And now they made, TD's at 103, 101. So you made literally 500% on your money in 12 years while clipping at time of purchase 10% plus per year.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. Okay.
That's a career in and of itself.
To do it at the time was just absolutely gut wrenching.
It takes a lot of bravery. So it sounds like you guys really ingrain your clients with that resiliency against these against the bumpy road.
It's educating. But it's really educating the emotional response, because everyone understands in hindsight that market corrections and bear markets are actually great wealth creating opportunities. It doesn't feel like it at the time.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that knowing something and feeling another thing are two complete things. It makes sense to buy in a bear market, when everything is low and everything looks like the end of the world is coming, but it does feel like it's the wrong move to make sometimes, right? But if it's as you said, if you feel like it's the wrong move, it's probably the right move.
But you also have to look at the flip side of it. I mean, you've been very good at describing this, but when you're investing for the economy, Warren Buffett talks about this all the time. He says, bet on the United States. He's a big proponent of the S&P 500.
Yeah.
But here's what you're making as a global investor. You're betting for the aggregate functioning of hundreds and hundreds of millions of people that are going to get up every day and try to make their lives better through going to work, feeding their family, all these different things, educating themselves, the aggregation of people trying to make their lives better. piece
Yeah.
by piece, day by day.
Yeah.
To bet against that is enormously risky long term.
Well, and human ingenuity, right? Like, every crisis will feel different and we'll say, oh, it's different this time. We're never going to figure this out. And it just, those kind of panic stricken comments. But humans tend to get together and we start to figure things out and we overcome it. So it's getting over those bumps if you can just withstand it.
Yeah.
And again, clients could do this on their own, but it's very, very difficult to override that emotional, roller coaster. And that's where we come in. Again, reminding them of the plan. We model things out. We look at it, bringing back that rational sense of what we're trying to do to ease their nerves.
So I have one last question for you guys. Sean, earlier you said that your clients, even over time, are worth more or they have more money than they've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, my question to you is this. Let's assume I have a successful career. I lead a successful career. I make, let's just say, $300,000 a year. Let's say I get taxed at $100,000. That's $200,000 left. I spend $100,000 to live my life, and I'm saving $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? After 10 years, that's $1 million. So by default, I'm growing rich. By default, I'm worth more than at the initial time frame of that 10-year period, right?
Mm-hmm.
My question to you, to you and Amy, as well as investment advisors and financial planners and portfolio managers, the $100,000 that I have that I'm saving every year, if I was to give it to you, what value do you add after the 10 years? What value did you add when by default I would have had $1 million saving out $100,000 a year? I'd have $1 million. What does your plan do? What is your advice to that advisor?
So we touched on a little bit on the portfolio management side. So investing that money, make sure it's compounding at a good rate of return to achieve your goals. But there's a lot of other things that we do day to day too. So the financial plan is not simply like, here's your retirement, here's, saving for your kids' education. There's a lot of other stuff. How tax efficient are you? Are you a person that's earning $300,000? Are you incorporated? How have you set it up? What about your estate plan? Have you thought that through? How do you pass that money that you've saved on to your next generation? So on and so forth. So there's a lot of little planning pieces that we need to look at. Also from an insurance perspective, Jalal, like when you look at setting this up, how do you want that money to that's another asset class that we haven't really touched on is insurance. Looking at all of those different components, it's more than just the one portfolio that we're talking about. It's a lot of other moving pieces that's incorporated.
So it's better than just saving $100,000 every year and putting it in my bank account, in my checking account.
You got it.
Yeah, and if let's say you save that $1 million over 10 years, well, what you think is $1 million today won't be $1 million 10 years from now.
Good point.
Less.
If it stays cash, you're saying that if it stays cash, inflation will remove.
Like in other words, what $1 million will buy today, you'll probably need $1.2, $1.3 million to buy that very same basket 10 years from now.
So technically, I would have lost $200,000-$300,000 had I invested.
It's not that much. I'm exaggerating to make a point, but you would have lost about if inflation's running at 2.5% per year.
Yeah.
Which is compounding against you, you'll lose about 125,000 easily. I'd have to do the hard math, but it'd be something that big.
Yeah.
Well, and also think in that scenario, and this is where we come through different stages of clients' lives. A lot of times you go through a period where you're younger, maybe you don't have any obligations right now, you might be saving a lot, and all of a sudden, boom, all of a sudden you might get married, you might have children, all of a sudden, wait a second, now you're spending a lot more, you're not saving as much until you get on the other side of that hump where kids are kind of starting to move out on their own, and now your savings picks up again. So it ebbs and it flows, and again, that's where that planning piece works with your personal situation to kind of keep up with all the different pieces, because it's going to change. As much as the best financial plan that we put in place, it will be totally different. And that's why you have to treat it like a business plan. It needs to be updated ongoing because your situation is going to keep
has to adapt, obviously,
exactly
to the social climate and everything. All right, well, those were all my questions. Did you guys have anything else you want to add?
No, I really look forward to coming out with to our clients and to our listeners with topical conversations around just a myriad of different things. I think it's going to be exciting. It's
absolutely too. Yeah,
I'm really excited because this is a new medium where we can reach out to our clients and our friends and and just share with them our thoughts on different things. And I'm really looking forward to doing many of these.
Well, we have the benefit from the chair that we're sitting in. We get to live the lives through a lot of different clients. And so we've seen, all sorts of scenarios. So this is an opportunity to share those stories that other people might be able to relate to.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely some of your previous experiences. You've answered a lot of questions, for your previous clients and your clients in general. Almost quite certain that your future clients will have the same questions, the same concerns. To create a median where we can address these issues and talk about these topics, I think is of great importance. Well, thanks, Sean. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks.
Thank you.
And we'll see hopefully everybody next time.